The 1960s gave us cinematic masterpieces, but not all of them stood the test of time. Some were forgotten, shelved, or buried beneath blockbusters. Today, we're digging up 13 criminally overlooked films from that golden era. Stories bold, strange, and beautiful, waiting for rediscovery. If you're a true film lover, these are the 13 forgotten 1960s movies you must watch today. 1. The Swimmer, 1968. Imagine a man walking into a cocktail party in his swim trunks, holding a drink, and casually announcing he'll swim his way home, via the pools of his neighbors. That's the opening of The Swimmer, and it only gets stranger from there. Burt Lancaster plays Ned Merrill, a once powerful, now seemingly delusional suburbanite who begins a surreal journey across Connecticut by diving into each swimming pool on the way to his home. But this isn't just a physical odyssey, it's a psychological one. With each pool, we dive deeper into Ned's past, his shattered relationships, and the lies he tells himself. The lush greenery, sun-drenched patios, and sparkling water contrast brutally with the growing emotional darkness. As the film progresses, the tone shifts from whimsical to eerie, almost Kafkaesque. You begin to realize that this man might not be returning home, because there might be no home left. Lancaster's performance is raw and unsettling. He peels back the confident exterior of Ned to reveal a broken man pretending everything is still perfect. Though it was critically praised in some circles, The Swimmer confused audiences in 1968. Its dreamlike structure, tonal ambiguity, and lack of a traditional narrative made it a tough sell. But today, it resonates even more, exploring themes of suburban decay, masculinity, and emotional repression that are frighteningly modern. This isn't just a forgotten movie, it's a forgotten warning. 2. Seconds, 1966. Starring Rock Hudson. Directed by John Frankenheimer. At first glance, Seconds seems like science fiction, but by the end, it feels more like a horror film wrapped in an existential crisis. Arthur Hamilton is a middle-aged banker who feels suffocated by his mundane suburban life. Then, a mysterious company offers him a second chance, a fake death, facial reconstruction, and a brand new identity. He's reborn as Tony Wilson, played by Rock Hudson, in a shockingly serious and vulnerable role. Tony's new life seems perfect. He's an artist in Malibu with freedom, youth, and sexual liberation. But the illusion begins to crack. Paranoia creeps in. His neighbors feel off. The company's influence seems inescapable. And worst of all, Tony realizes that changing your face doesn't change your soul. The dissatisfaction he tried to escape comes flooding back, stronger, more haunting. Director John Frankenheimer uses extreme angles, fish-eye lenses, and stark black-and-white photography to turn every frame into a distorted reflection. The cinematography puts you inside Tony's mind, where identity feels like a costume and nothing is quite real. When it premiered at Cannes, Seconds was booed. Critics didn't know what to make of it, and audiences expecting a light Rock Hudson film were traumatized. It was a financial failure. But over time, it's gained cult status, and rightfully so. It's one of the most terrifying explorations of self-deception ever filmed. If The Swimmer was a descent into emotional ruin, Seconds is a free fall into the abyss of identity itself. 3. Pullia, 1968. On the surface, Pullia might look like just another free-spirited love story from the late 1960s. But beneath its swinging San Francisco aesthetics lies one of the most emotionally fractured and underrated character studies of the decade. This isn't a film about love. It's a film about emotional debris. Julie Christie plays Pullia Danner, a wealthy but emotionally unstable young woman trapped in a violent marriage. She meets George C. Scott's character, Archie Bolin, a recently divorced doctor. Their affair doesn't blossom into romance. It disintegrates into something far more complex. Pullia's whimsical exterior hides deep trauma. Archie's cold detachment masks a yearning to connect, but he doesn't know how. Director Richard Lester, known for A Hard Day's Night, uses flash-forwards, flashbacks, and disorienting edits to create a fragmented emotional reality. The nonlinear structure mirrors the character's inner chaos. You never quite know where you are in time, and that's the point. Pullia was telling its story like memory, out of order, filtered through feeling, and often painful. It was also one of the first mainstream films to portray domestic abuse with brutal honesty. Pullia's marriage is more than troubled. It's terrifying. The violence is never gratuitous, but always jarring, forcing the viewer to confront the realities women faced behind the facade of wealth and privilege. George C. Scott gives one of his finest performances, restrained, bruised, and deeply human. And Julie Christie? She's ethereal, haunted, and tragic. A woman laughing through her own unraveling. Pullia didn't connect with mass audiences upon release. Too elliptical, too emotionally ambiguous, too modernist for viewers expecting clean narratives. But today, it feels revolutionary. It captures that moment in history when the American dream began to rot from the inside out. It's not a film you watch and move on from. It lingers, it bruises, and it makes you realize how rarely we see such complex emotional disintegration on screen. 4. Point Blank, 1967. There's revenge, and then there's Point Blank. Lee Marvin doesn't just star in this film, he dominates it. His presence is like a walking gunshot, cold, unstoppable, and somehow deeply wounded. As Walker, a man double-crossed by his best friend and left for dead after a heist, Marvin returns not just to get his money, but to obliterate every layer of corruption standing in his way. On the surface, this might sound like a typical noir revenge tale, but Point Blank is anything but typical. Director John Boorman injects it with a surreal, dreamlike style that fragments time, blends memory with hallucination, and turns a straightforward narrative into a psychological labyrinth. Walker's world isn't just dangerous, it's disjointed. Rooms feel empty and echoing. Conversations are clipped, cryptic. It's like watching a ghost stalk through a city of illusions. Boorman's visual language, angular framing, washed-out lighting, dissonant sound, makes Los Angeles feel like a purgatory where justice is a myth. The film is also startlingly modern. It deconstructs masculinity before that was even a conversation in cinema. Walker isn't a hero. He's not even a complete person. He's vengeance, given flesh. And as he climbs the criminal ladder to retrieve what he's owed, you begin to question whether he even wants the money, or if he's just chasing shadows. Critics were baffled when it premiered. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. But over time, Point Blank has been hailed as a visionary work, influencing directors from Quentin Tarantino to Steven Soderbergh. It's cold, it's bold, and it's unforgettable. 5. The Haunting, 1963. Before haunted houses became staples of cheap thrills and CGI gimmicks, there was The Haunting, a masterclass in atmospheric horror and psychological dread. Directed by Robert Wise, who would go on to direct The Sound of Music, this film is the cinematic equivalent of a cold breath down the back of your neck. Based on Shirley Jackson's novel The Haunting of Hill House, the story centers on a group of individuals brought to an old mansion to investigate reports of the paranormal. But unlike modern horror that relies on blood and gore, The Haunting terrifies through suggestion, sound, and the increasingly unreliable perceptions of its protagonist, Eleanor, played brilliantly by Julie Harris. The house itself becomes a character, an oppressive, living entity. Strange noises echo through the halls, doors breathe, shadows stretch just a little too long, and yet nothing is ever fully shown. That's the genius of it. Wise used wide-angle lenses and unnatural camera angles to make the interior architecture seem twisted and malevolent. You begin to feel as if the house is watching, waiting. But the true terror of The Haunting lies in Eleanor's fragile psyche. She's a lonely, emotionally neglected woman looking for a place to belong. Hill House becomes a mirror of her subconscious, her fears, her guilt, her longing for acceptance. As her mental state deteriorates, we're left wondering, is the house truly haunted? Or is Eleanor simply falling apart? Despite glowing reviews from select critics, the film never achieved mainstream popularity. Audiences wanted something more tangible, more explainable. But today, The Haunting is recognized as one of the most sophisticated and terrifying horror films ever made. It inspired generations of filmmakers, including Mike Flanagan's acclaimed Netflix adaptation, and remains a gold standard in psychological horror. This is not a film you watch with popcorn. It's a film you survive. 6. The Incident, 1967. Rarely does a film grab you by the throat and refuse to let go. The Incident does exactly that. It's a gritty, claustrophobic, and brutally realistic thriller that unfolds almost entirely in one place, a New York City subway car. The story follows two young delinquents, played with unnerving menace by Tony Musante and a then-unknown Martin Sheen, as they board a late-night train and slowly begin terrorizing the passengers. What starts as crude jokes and mocking escalates into emotional manipulation, violence, and psychological torture. The passengers, a cross-section of New Yorkers from all walks of life, are forced to confront their own cowardice, prejudices, and inability to act. The power of The Incident lies in its raw simplicity. Shot in stark black and white, with minimal music and handheld cameras, the film feels like a documentary of urban fear. The subway car becomes a crucible. Every moment is tense. Every silence feels like a scream about to erupt. What makes the film so unforgettable is its brutal honesty about human behavior. It doesn't paint heroes and villains in broad strokes. Instead, it exposes the quiet failures of ordinary people who choose inaction over intervention. It holds a mirror to society, and the reflection is ugly. The performances are exceptional across the board. Martin Sheen is chilling in his debut role, oozing danger with every smirk. But it's the ensemble cast that drives home the message. Fear doesn't discriminate, and silence can be as violent as action. Despite critical acclaim, The Incident was largely forgotten after its release. Too grim, too real, too confrontational. But for those who rediscover it today, it feels shockingly relevant. A film about what happens when good people do nothing. In an age of performative heroism, The Incident asks the scariest question of all. What would you do? 7th Charlie, 1968. Charlie is the kind of film that quietly devastates. Based on the acclaimed novel Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, the film tackles one of the most haunting questions of the human condition. What happens when a man is given everything he ever wanted, only to slowly lose it all? Cliff Robertson plays Charlie Gordon, a kind-hearted but intellectually disabled man working as a janitor in Boston. He's treated with casual cruelty, and ignored by most until he becomes the subject of a radical scientific experiment. Through an experimental brain surgery, Charlie's IQ skyrockets. He begins to think faster, read voraciously, understand nuance, even fall in love. He becomes a genius, a miracle. But as his intelligence grows, so does his awareness of how people once treated him, of the loneliness that intelligence can't erase, and of the ticking clock on his condition. The film takes a tragic turn when Charlie discovers the effects of the surgery are temporary. Just as quickly as he ascended, he begins to regress. Robertson delivers a heartbreaking performance that earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor. He plays both extremes of Charlie's intellect with subtlety and empathy, never caricaturing either version. His transformation is not just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, tragic. Director Ralph Nelson uses experimental split-screen effects, dream sequences, and documentary-style footage to visually represent Charlie's inner transformation. Some of the techniques feel dated now, but the emotional weight still hits with full force. It was bold filmmaking for its time, and, arguably, still is. Charlie was a modest box office success and garnered critical praise, but over the decades, it faded from cultural memory. That's a shame, because its themes about human dignity, scientific ethics, and emotional intelligence feel more relevant today than ever. It's not just a science fiction story, it's a human story. One that leaves you asking what truly defines a person. Their intellect, their heart, or their soul. 8. The Servant, 1963. The Servant is one of the most elegantly sinister films of the 1960s, a psychological drama that peels back the facade of British class structure with icy precision. This isn't a film that shouts. It whispers, undermines, manipulates, and eventually, it poisons. At the center of the story is Tony, a wealthy young aristocrat who hires a manservant named Barrett to maintain his newly purchased London townhouse. At first, Barrett seems perfect, loyal, efficient, and obedient. But slowly, things begin to shift. Boundaries blur, roles reverse, and what was once a clear-cut relationship between master and servant becomes something much darker. Barrett begins subtly controlling Tony's life, bringing in his supposed sister to seduce him, undermining his confidence, and manipulating his emotions. The house becomes a battleground of class warfare and psychological control. Tony transforms from confident employer to broken dependent. By the end, you're not even sure who's in control, or whoever was. Dirk Bogarde delivers one of the most chilling performances of his career. His Barrett is neither overtly cruel nor cartoonishly evil. He's something more insidious, calm, quiet, calculating. James Fox, meanwhile, undergoes a stunning transformation, from suave to shattered, with masterful restraint. The screenplay by Harold Pinter is sparse but razor-sharp. Dialogue is loaded with subtext. Every pause, every glance, every line becomes a move in a silent chess game. Director Joseph Lucy uses long takes, shadowy interiors, and claustrophobic framing to intensify the psychological tension. The house feels like it's slowly closing in, swallowing both men whole. Though critically acclaimed, The Servant never became a household name outside cinephile circles. Its nuanced take on power, class, and dependency was ahead of its time. Today, it plays like a slow-motion horror film, one where the monster wears a perfectly tailored suit and always asks if you'd like more tea. It's elegant, it's eerie, and it's absolutely essential viewing. 9. The Damned, 1963. When a film begins with leather-clad biker gangs and ends in a hidden government bunker filled with radioactive children, you know you're in for something completely unexpected. The Damned is not an easy film to categorize. It starts like a gritty British juvenile delinquent drama and morphs slowly, terrifyingly, into one of the most surreal and haunting science fiction films of the 1960s. Set in a sleepy seaside town in England, the story follows an American tourist named Simon, who crosses paths with King, the volatile leader of a motorcycle gang. After a violent encounter, Simon ends up entangled with King's mysterious sister, Joan. But their escape from King's fury leads them to stumble upon a dark military secret, an underground bunker where a group of children are being raised in isolation, immune to radiation, intended to survive a future nuclear apocalypse. Director Joseph Losey crafts the film like a fever dream. He plays with tone and genre, blending post-war paranoia, Cold War anxiety, and psychological horror into a strange, intoxicating brew. The film's central conceit, children doomed to outlive humanity, never knowing the world outside, is horrifying in its quiet tragedy. These children aren't monsters. They're victims of preparation, symbols of a world that has already decided its own end is inevitable. Oliver Reed gives one of his earliest breakout performances as King, portraying him not just as a thug, but a man writhing with insecurity, control issues, and twisted loyalty. His presence alone injects the film with danger. The Damned was shelved by its studio for years and only received proper release long after its completion. It was too strange, too dark, and far too politically subversive for mainstream audiences at the time. But viewed today, it stands out as a prophetic warning, one that feels uncomfortably relevant in a world still grappling with nuclear fears and environmental collapse. This is not just a forgotten film. It's a forgotten scream in the void, and it still echoes. 10. The Shooting, 1966. Minimalism has rarely felt so menacing. The Shooting is a film that says little but implies everything. It's a Western by genre, but a psychological riddle by design, one of the most cryptic and unsettling films to ever emerge from the genre's golden age. The story, what little there is of it, begins with a former bounty hunter named Willett Gashade, who returns to a desert mining camp to find his partner gone and his brother in hiding after an unexplained killing. Soon, a mysterious woman arrives, unnamed and played with icy detachment by Millie Perkins. She hires Gashade to lead her through the desert. He reluctantly agrees. They are joined by a menacing, silent gunslinger played by a young, feral Jack Nicholson. As they move deeper into the barren, sun-bleached landscape, tensions rise. The woman refuses to explain her motives. The heat and silence become oppressive, and the characters seem to unravel as the film trudges toward an ambiguous, shocking finale that raises more questions than it answers. Director Monty Hellman filmed The Shooting on a shoestring budget in the Utah desert, yet turned those limitations into strengths. The sparse dialogue, the endless, empty landscapes, the absence of a musical score, all contribute to a growing sense of unease. It's not about action, it's about anticipation. Every silence feels like a loaded gun. Jack Nicholson, still years away from superstardom, oozes threat with just a look. His character barely speaks, but his presence dominates the film. Warren Oates, as always, plays the everyman forced into moral confusion and existential dread. When The Shooting was first released, it confused audiences. It didn't follow traditional Western tropes. There were no clear heroes or villains, no redemption arc, just quiet dread, moral ambiguity, and the vastness of the unknown. Today, it's hailed as a precursor to the revisionist westerns of the 1970s. Watching the shooting feels like being lost in the desert, directionless, disoriented, and haunted. And maybe that's the point. 11. If. 1968. Long before he starred in A Clockwork Orange, Malcolm McDowell exploded onto the screen in If, a surreal, anarchic, and fiercely political satire that dared to turn the hallowed walls of the British public school system into a battleground for revolution. The film follows Mick Travis, a rebellious student at a prestigious boarding school. The institution is rigid, hierarchical, and brutal in its discipline. The older boys, known as whips, are granted authority over the younger ones. Sadistic rituals, sexual repression, and blind obedience define the environment. Mick, along with two friends, begins to resist. What starts with small acts of defiance slowly builds to full-blown rebellion. But If is not a straightforward narrative. Lindsay Anderson blends realism with surrealism, slipping in dreamlike sequences that blur the lines between fantasy and reality. At one point, a chapel sermon cuts to students engaging in machine gun warfare against the faculty from the rooftop. Is it real? A metaphor? Or both? What makes the film so powerful is its refusal to explain itself. It trusts the audience to absorb its fury and draw their own conclusions. It's a critique of authoritarianism, militarism, class, and hypocrisy, wrapped in the trappings of a coming-of-age story. McDowell is electric, commanding the screen with defiant charm and simmering rage. His performance set the tone for a generation of cinematic anti-heroes. The film itself was so controversial that it was banned in several countries and labeled dangerous. Over the years, If has inspired countless filmmakers and political thinkers. Yet, despite winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes, it remains underseen, especially outside the UK. It's a film that speaks to anyone who's ever questioned a system designed to crush individuality. You don't just watch If, you feel it, like a slap in the face or a spark to dry kindling. 12. This Sporting Life, 1963. Before Rocky, before Raging Bull, there was This Sporting Life, a gritty, emotionally raw portrait of a professional rugby player clawing his way through the mud, both on the field and off. Directed by Lindsay Anderson and starring a ferocious Richard Harris, this British drama rips apart the myth of the working-class sports hero. Harris plays Frank Machine, a coal miner turned rugby player in northern England. He's aggressive, talented, and angry, on the field and in life. His rise to fame is quick, but his emotional intelligence lags behind. At home, he falls in love, or maybe obsession, with his widowed landlady, Margaret, who wants nothing to do with his violent, unpredictable nature. Their relationship is the heart of the film, and it's anything but romantic. Frank is desperate to be loved. Margaret is too emotionally damaged to offer it. What follows is a brutal, cyclical dynamic of desire, rejection, and emotional implosion. Shot in stark black and white, the film uses handheld cameras and naturalistic performances to immerse us in the bleak reality of 1960s industrial England. The rugby matches are violent and chaotic, mirroring Frank's own internal battles. There's no gloss, no slow-motion glory, just blood, mud, and pain. Richard Harris is extraordinary. His Frank is a boiling pot of masculinity, frustration, and confusion. He won Best Actor at Cannes for the role, and it remains one of the finest performances in British cinema history. Despite its acclaim, This Sporting Life has largely vanished from the public eye. It was too grim for mainstream appeal, too honest for easy consumption. But it paved the way for the kitchen sink realism that would dominate British cinema for years. It's not just a sports film. It's a cry of emotional desperation from a man who can conquer a stadium, but can't understand his own heart. 13. Burn, 1969. Rarely has a film been so incendiary, both thematically and literally, as Burn. Directed by Italian filmmaker Gillo Pontecorvo, best known for The Battle of Algiers, this searing anti-colonial drama stars Marlon Brando at his most calculating and complex. Brando plays Sir William Walker, a British agent sent to the fictional Caribbean island of Queimada to stir up a slave revolt and oust Portuguese control. Walker manipulates a young black revolutionary, José Dolores, helping him rise to power. But when the British interests are threatened, Walker returns years later, this time to crush the very revolution he helped ignite. What unfolds is a brutal indictment of colonialism, capitalism, and the way imperial powers exploit freedom as a temporary illusion. Walker's duplicity is chilling. He encourages rebellion only when it serves his nation's interests, and extinguishes it when it becomes inconvenient. Brando's performance is chilling in its intelligence and restraint. He reportedly clashed with Pontecorvo on set, yet delivered one of his most nuanced roles. He speaks softly, almost academically, but behind every word lies a cold calculation. Walker doesn't hate the people he betrays. He simply sees them as tools in a geopolitical chess game. The cinematography is stunning. Sun-bleached islands, crumbling plantations, burning villages. The soundtrack by Ennio Morricone is eerie and mournful, underscoring the human cost of political manipulation. Burn was a box office failure in the US and heavily edited for its English release. Its uncomfortable truths and radical politics made studios nervous. But in recent years, the film has been reclaimed by scholars and cinephiles as a masterpiece of political cinema. It doesn't offer redemption. It offers reflection on what was burned, what was built, and who profits when the flames die down. These films may be forgotten by time, but they are unforgettable once seen. They challenge, provoke, and haunt. If you're ready to rediscover the raw, daring, and revolutionary spirit of 1960s cinema, start here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's keep these hidden classics alive.